Hello, welcome Exiles to look at my Absolution Guardian build for the Gauntlet. And if you're looking for a noob friendly, hopefully mostly brain off way to maybe beat the campaign, I think this is something you should consider as a good option. I am not necessarily the fastest speedrunner when it comes to campaign, nor the best hardcore player. And this build not only gave me one of my fastest campaign times, but it also gave me deathless campaigns doing this in a hardcore SSF private league with a bunch of mods. You'll see 20% more life, 70 AoE, 20 monster damage, 20 monster speed, plus 2 proj. I did this in a hardcore solo self-found run, and we ended up finishing the campaign in about 4 hours in a little bit, like 418, I think is what it was. And I have to say, this character just feels smooth pretty much the whole way through, as long as you can get to the pocket pox, the big Sentinel of Radiance that does RF and hits pretty dang hard himself. And the damage is just pretty dang killer, in my opinion, for a very tanky, hardcore SSF type of build. Now, let's just go ahead and take a look at a bit of the campaign progression. And I'm going to try to upsell you on what this build does and why I'm recommending it. So, to start with things, early on, it's always Magma Orb with Templar. Quite frankly, you could go Firecaster leveling all the way till your first lab, but I opted to swap to Absolution right when we got to level 12 because Absolution is a level 12 gem. And you'll notice the only thing that changes between the Magma Orb tree and this tree is just respec a couple nodes, grab these points, unspec these points. It's pretty big to get rid of these elemental damage nodes to get 30% additional minion damage because the Absolution minions will be doing the bulk of your damage for the most of the run. Initially, when you first swap, it's closer to even, but as you progress the character, the minions are just going to do way more damage than your baseline casting is doing in the game. So that's what it starts off with. This is when we swap into Absolution right here, right now. The first PowerPoint of this character that I want to stress that makes this character feel good for a leveling situation is you get to start scaling attack speed right away. And that to me is a pretty big deal because these nodes are giving your Absolution minions damage. They're giving them cast speed, but it's also giving you, the player, attack speed, which means your shield charge will feel good. One of the very nice things for progressing through a gauntlet or a hardcore solo self-found run is being able to move and transition through zones quickly. This means you're going to be able to farm gear faster, you can over level faster, and then you can push the content with a more progressed character because you could do some extra farming quicker. And shield charge speed is a big part of that. And normally you might have to go into some shield charge speed versus some power. Like, for example, a firecaster would go up here, they'd grab the fire damage mastery, and then they'd grab these nodes, and it wouldn't give the firecaster leveling run any additional power besides just making you shield charge faster, whereas this is giving you more single target on top of making your shield charge faster. So it starts off very nice, getting yourself some extra speed, and then what you're transitioning to is you're working your way towards these minion damage nodes apply to yourself, so that way when you hit a normal pack, you will kill the whole normal pack, you'll instantly summon 3 Absolution Sentinels, and they transition with you through the area. I'm going to try to showcase this real quick in game to give you a look at what this feels like. And it's a big part of why I like this character is because right away at, you know, when you start playing with Absolution, instantly you have this aspect of the dudes, they teleport with you. Because, like, let's say you're over here, and you'll notice whenever I'm shield charging around, okay, I went to, like, the least densely populated zone I could have. Whoops. Let's do a zone that actually has monsters in it. But anyways, let's say you start out here, you have your guys that will teleport around with you. You'll kill a couple monsters, you will instantly spawn your 3 Absolution guys, and then as you go through the zone, as you run through it, they will be shooting things around you. So you have this really nice, like, clear speed potential where you can just focus on running and gunning through the zone, and you'll be picking up kills and XP and extra loot as you go because they have quite a long duration. Their base duration on the gem is actually like 15 seconds, and then just with this wheel here, you'll get them all the way up to about a 24-second duration, which means you don't really have to cast much yourself, and you can focus on moving around the zone and maintaining speed. So let's go ahead and continue to talk about the progression of the character. So you're starting off going straight through these life nodes, some early tank, moving up to spiritual aid, and the important thing here is this wheel is getting you very high value in that it's giving you a attack speed, so it makes your shield charge faster, more quality life for you, and then it's giving a bunch of cast speed and percent damage to your absolution guys. So their damage is going through the roof. And then spiritual aid at the end makes it so you consistently kill packs and can summon them very quickly right when you enter the zone. You hit one normal pack, you'll get all 3 absolution minions, and you can just start sprinting through the zone at your own leisure. The other important thing is early on, this Sentinel, the Pocket Pox, hard carries because he scales with minion life and he doesn't have any socket links. Initially, when you're only on a 4 link, he's pretty comparable to, like, let's say a 4 link skill, but he's a little bit better than that in terms of, like, he starts out with a very high baseline power because your initial nodes are minion life plus percent damage, and you have this mastery for minion life here, and it makes him initially just be a very tanky. He doesn't die. He persists through zones. He B gives you 20 DR, so 20% of the damage that goes to you gets taken from your Sentinel of Radiance first. So he gives you a big defense. And then C, on top of that, he actually deals a lot of damage. He has a big Righteous Fire area, which you'll grab this AoE node, which will help out your Absolution AoE, and it'll help out your Guardian's AoE. And as you're running through the zones, he teleports with you. That AoE will kill enemies, and he ends up dealing quite a bit of damage himself. So this node is one of the best early nodes, and it's hard for me to stress how good it is as an early node. The only node I would really take earlier as like an early game power node, and this would probably even be more softcore. I like him more for hardcore start than I do the Elemental's Golem node. But Elemental's Golem node, for example, I view as one of the strongest early game nodes, and I think this actually competes with it, if not being better in a hardcore environment, because of that 20% damage diversion gives you a lot of additional tank on top of giving you clear speed and damage throughout your run. So right out of the gate, once you get to this point here, you've gotten your first lab, it's pretty dang smooth sailing. I will link to my run below and you can kind of see the progression of what this looked like as I played this character. But it's pretty smooth, basically progression where you can just run. And I'm probably overcasting Absolution more than I need to. This was like my second time playing or testing this character, so I'm still getting the feel for it. But you can just pretty much shield charge around, and then when you see a blue pack, you can convocate to purposely put the Sentinel of Radiance on the enemy. But the Guardian plus your Sentinel Absolutions, they just rip through things for single target on top of giving you some nice defensive layer from that 20 damage diversion. And keep in mind, he also taunts. Whenever he hits the enemy, he taunts. And for 99% of the campaign, that means they're always going to be targeting the Sentinel of Radiance and not you. So it gives you not only the 20% damage diversion, but it makes enemies target him, which means you just stand not next to him and they won't be targeting you, which helps protect you against a lot of the ruin mechanics that will exist in the campaign. So that's my upsell on Sentinel of Radiance. As for progression, after you get this early stuff here, then you're going to start working your way over to the Witch area. And I want to point out something very, very nice about the early game of this build, and it's block. When you are playing Ruin in the campaign, something that basically lets you avoid Ruin is block. If you don't know, if you play Ultimatum, you ever run Ruin, when an enemy hits you that has a Ruin ability and you block that hit, you do not get the Ruin stack. So one of the things that's going to be very important in this gauntlet is getting block. Now, initially, when our character just has this wheel here, we only have 30-30 block, but very quickly on, once you get yourself a shield with some block chance roll and you pick up this wheel, all of a sudden your block is getting up higher and higher. And then later on, before you finish the campaign or right when you're finishing the campaign, you're going to be basically at block cap just from this wheel here, and this wheel here, on top of the Guardian block nodes. That's just an important thing in terms of progression, where you're starting to work your way up the tank ladder that comes with the Guardian Ascendancy. Now, I want to point out here specifically, because this is the transition where we get 12% mana reservation efficiency, and we go from a class that has Tempest Shield plus Flesh and Stone, 2 nice defensive auras, to now we can fit in Determination, and we have 3 nice defensive auras that will pretty much carry a lot of our tank throughout the entire run. Now, the important thing to note here is When you're going to add in Determination, you will have 12% of your mana unreserved. And in order to make this feel good in terms of mana sustain, there are a couple important sources of mana regen. Number one is Mystic Bulwark gives us 1% mana regen per block. This will end up going to like 75 or 78 mana regen, which is very nice. But number two is we have a bit of mana nodes and we have the lightning golem. On my character, in Act 4, you will add the lightning golem, which gives you A, some nice quality of life attack speed, but B, it will give you mana regen. One thing that's I need to stress here is the lightning golem is actually a crap ton of mana regen, pretty much like a clarity aura without having to reserve a bunch of mana because clarity is quite expensive in terms of mana reservation, and it will solve your mana regen. Of your summons that you will have in this build, he will die the most. He doesn't die that often, but he will occasionally die. So I'd recommend having him on a keybind, like your Sentinel of Radiance, which Sentinel of Radiance, I think throughout this entire run, which my character is 86, Sentinel of Radiance has died, I think, twice to very, like, I guess, rippy mechanics where I had him, like, sitting on a DD box with a bunch of corpses type of thing. And you want to pay somewhat attention. If you see him die, resummon him, get him back in the fight. If you notice your mana regen isn't occurring, that's because your lightning golem has died, because that is an important part of your base mana regen, which then gets scaled with things like the mana regen rate from Mystic Bulwark. So that's some of the progression there. Is you're adding in Determination once you get this Reservation Mastery here, along with the lightning golem for that extra mana regen. Another thing I want to note here is on your progression, you'll notice early on, we go for things like the spell block per attack damage. Initially, this is nice because I want that higher damage avoidance, but once you get your Merciless Lab, this mastery changes to life and mana recover on block because you get enough spell block from this node here where you're going to be capped anyways and you no longer need that spell block. That's just a transition point I want to make note of because it's a little bit weird when you see a mastery but you don't notice it actually change. That's the point at which that changes. Another thing you'll notice on this tree is initially we have these Holy Dominion nodes. This is for pretty much for res. Once you get enough res where you're overcapped, that's when you can drop these points and you can go for something like mana over here for a bit of sustain, bit of ES, or just some more life nodes, or just progress the tree a bit further. But that's something I want to make note of here. Let's say if you're over res cap at this point, you can start jettisoning these nodes to start working your way over here. Just keep these as long as you need res, just a little bit of a progression thing. Another thing I should notice here is we do end up grabbing the pen mastery. Don't do this until you have elemental weakness because it says you need to have the enemy cursed. It doesn't make sense to grab this 8 pen node until you have a curse. Just something I want to note there. The first masteries you definitely want to be going for are the 30 life node and the AoE node. So yeah, that's a bit of the progression. And our Cruel Lab, I opted to go for Relics. You could go for Block first if you want to play more defensive, but Relics is so much damage, so I personally would recommend that in terms of getting the fight over with as quickly as possible. That's up to you, but I would recommend Relics. So yeah, that's the progression of the character. The character's run I have on you, I'll link to on YouTube, but it's basically a 4-hour campaign time, 4:18, for us to kill Katava, and we're ending the campaign with a block capped character with Flesh and Stone, with Determination, with the Sentinel of Radiance damage diversion. You can look through the run to see what it looks like. But I very much like those defensive layers and then just progressing our initial Atlas. See if I can pull up the correct thing here. We have about half the Atlas completed, working through our yellow maps now, our T10s one by one. And this character is at about 8 hours of progression, just working our way through, getting our defenses up. And another big thing I want to note here is Absolution versus Val Absolution. You absolutely want Val Absolution. This thing will literally more than double your single target when you have it. On my run, I took about, I think, 7 or 8 Val Orbs to hit it. It's a 1 in 4. Your first chance to get it is in Act 2 with the Temple Corruption Chamber. Always attempt that. Make sure you have an extra Transmute laying around in case you miss. That way you can go back to Act 1 and buy yourself one. And by miss, I mean in case you like get a D level or it levels up and you can no longer equip it. Then you're going to need to make sure you have an extra transmute sitting around. But you want to try to Val Absolution gems every single time you get it. And then if you hit a Val Absolution, it's under leveled, put it in your offhand, catch it up to level, and then start using it. Because Val Absolution, when it's up, it just is absolutely frying things. So yeah, that is a rough look at the character. Some little tidbits about some gems we're going for here. Initially, I'd recommend Absolution with something like faster casting, Fizz the Lightning, added fire, something like that as your initial 4 link. Once you get to Act 4, you can swap for Spell Echo. There are other gems like Hypothermia, which can work pretty nice once you have your relics that give hatred, for example. But yeah, those are some of the links I'd recommend early on. And then as for your other gems, I like shield charge with momentum, faster attacks, just to make sure this feels good for moving your character around. We are also using a feeding frenzy attached to lightning golem, elemental army, and raised specter, so that way our specters can occasionally give us some exposure as well as proc the 10% minion attack and cast speed, which I believe that feeding frenzy also applies to our shield charge speed, I think, but I'm not 100% sure. And so yeah, maybe gives you a bit more speed, but it definitely gives your Absolution guys some more cast speed, so they're dealing more damage. And then for the specters, we are starting off with just the frenzy and the power charge monkey, which you can find in Act 2 right here, as well as Act 7. And they're called the initial one in Act 2 is like this. I forget what this guy's called. I think he's like Stygian Spy or something. You can control A when you have a Spectre skill on your bar, and this is called a Stygian Silverback, but he gives frenzy charges. So initially you can do him with Feeding Frenzy, and then you can get a Host Chieftain, which gives power charges in Act 7 Ashen Fields. And there's also Carnage Chieftain here as well, which gives frenzy charges for your Spectre, just giving you a bit more Spectre or a bit more charge damage to your Absolution guys. So yeah, that stuff's the kind of the progression. Eventually you can add a trigger mod, which can be found in Act 9. There's a little side area in the refinery, a little underground area that leads to the trigger craft. I don't know, Gazzy probably has a video on that, maybe, I would imagine. But that's just for trigger offering, just for 30% additional speed to your Absolution guys for more damage. Convocation, I would not recommend triggering if you have or having on automation. I think it's much more useful to be able to say, oh, there's a blue pack here. Let me make sure I put my Sentinel of Radiance on top of the blue pack. If you have it on automation, it convocates them when you don't want them to, or in random places that are not ideal. Especially in boss fights, like let's say your Sentinel of Radiance is on top of the boss, he's taunted the boss is aiming at him. You don't want the Sentinel of Radiance to get moved off the boss, so he's no longer hitting the boss, but then having the boss turn around and try to shoot your Sentinel of Radiance, which is now on top of your character. So I would not recommend automating Convocation. You want control over it. As well as Elemental Weakness, it's just nice to make sure you're getting that curse out right away, not necessarily waiting for a trigger, stuff like that. So yeah, that's some of the tidbits about the character. This is just a plan I have for my progression build for Gauntlet. We are going to be swapping late game into, I'm going to try to go to a Scorching Ray of Immolation character, and we'll see how that goes. I'm not necessarily going to give you, I'll show you guys a look at it, but I'm not going to link a POV to it because I'm not actually sure 100% of this is what I'm going to go with. This is what I'm thinking about going with potentially. And the reason for this skill right here is it stacks. Immolation, when it's on a totem, the dot applied to the enemy has its own individual counter, and you can get multiple instances of it. So it's like you summon 2, they each beam the boss, they each place 1 Scorching Ray of Immolation on the boss, and you can keep re-summoning them and stacking up more Immolation dots. And it's one of the reasons I think this maybe has a chance at being solid damage while having a character that's like 99% invested into defense to maybe still do some decent damage on Ubers in Gauntlet, if we even get there. But that's this character, which I might swap to something like this. I'm not fully decided on it, so I'm not going to link the POV to below. But the goal is we're going to farm Gauntlet with Absolution and Val Absolution and transition into Hyro Scorching Ray of Immolation. That's my rough plan for the Gauntlet. Take it from me, for context, I am not a pro hardcore player. I just started doing gauntlets like the past couple gauntlets, and I've been really enjoying them. This is my plan as somebody who does not trust himself as a hardcore player necessarily to be that good. This is a build that I think is strong enough to carry somebody who's not great at hardcore to get through the campaign and then maybe get you farming some maps. So yeah, anyways, that is my plan for Gauntlet. Hopefully you guys enjoy it. If you're planning to do a Templar, this is maybe one thing you could look at for starting. As always, thanks for watching, Exiles. Take care and peace out. Have a good rest of your evenings. Take care, guys.